Well, there were brothels. There were quite a few brothels, and there were gambling halls, and it was a real lively place. Most of them came after the Second World War. They had an earlier vice district further down on Crockett Street, and they referred to that as a reservation. But after the war, that's when so many of these others, Rita's place she bought the Dixie in 1946, and it was quite luxurious. She hired an interior decorator to decorate it. It had plush carpets, Gone with the Wind murals on in the hallway, and it was known throughout Texas as one of the best brothels in Texas. It's not that Beaumont was so different from other cities in Texas. I mean, there were red light districts, in Dallas, in Amarillo, and some of the larger towns.
Well, and there was a lot of industry in Beaumont from, ever since Spindletop. There were oil field workers, and this was a very industrial city, and there was a lot of people in and out of Beaumont. Mm-hmm. And, the environment for the brothels was fostered by the fact that the local law enforcement were basically on the take, and they were enabling that environment to exist. Around 1960 is when Robert Kennedy was sort of stirring things up, he kind of got on a crusade against organized crime, and at the same time there was a legislator named Tom James in Texas, and he spearheaded a commission called, which came to be called the James Commission. It was the General Legislative Commission, and his commission was to come down and investigate the brothels and investigate the local law enforcement, and to find out if they were in fact on the take and why these brothels were able to continue to operate. And not only the brothels, but the gambling. I mean, mm-hmm. I think they were much more interested in the gambling operations and the illegal liquor operations than they were at the brothels, because they, in addition to the brothels, you'd have these big gambling operations where you'd have ticker tape machines from Western Union, you'd have card games going on, dice games going on. It was a big deal. And gambling is obviously legal in Texas. And so I think they were more interested in that. And the brothels became the scandalous part, that brought down a lot of the locals. But in 1960, they sent down a group of investigators headed by Tom James in December of 1960, and they went undercover into all the brothels and witnessed all of the gambling and everything else that was going on in the gambling establishments, the illegal liquor sales, and gathered enough evidence to conclude that the only way these operations are being conducted is if they have the support of the local law enforcement. And so they got their evidence, they conducted raids, they got all of the information back, and then they decided they were going to conduct in January 4th of 1961 publicly televised hearings, and they were just going to march everybody involved in front of the public on TV, and nothing like that had ever been done. It was kind of like Iran-Contra,
Yeah.
But it was local Beaumont, and Wanda remembers it. Of course, I wasn't around, but she remembers watching it. I think they closed schools down. They let the schools watch them, didn't they?
Yes. At South Park High School, the students were able to go into the auditorium and watch the public hearings.
And David Witts was the general counsel for the legislature at the time, and he was a lawyer from Dallas, and he conducted, it didn't have the legal standing of like an actual trial. It was basically an informative session. So the lawyers did not have the ability to, no one was to arrest and all that stuff. It was more like an informative hearing, but they marched the sheriff and all the madams and gambling people in front of the hearing commission, and they questioned them, and most people took the Fifth Amendment. They took the Fifth and didn't answer, and so from that they conducted, they had indictments and trials, but no one was ever convicted, because in Beaumont, the level of involvement and the system that protected the brothels and the gambling establishment went all the way to the grand juries. And there's a lot in the book about
There
how
were 2 grand juries, in fact,
right,
for a while.
Two grand juries, and the grand juries were pretty much influenced by the DA, who was Ramey Griffin, who was on the take, and the sheriff, who was Charlie Myers. And all of these people were beloved in Beaumont. They were pillars of society. And Wanda, I think, can expand on when once the public found out about the level of involvement, you know, it was kind of a split. There were people that knew about it, knew they were on the take and supported it. And then there was another faction led by members of churches that just wanted to clean it up. And there was a split, I think, in Beaumont between the people that wanted things to stay the same and the people that wanted things to be cleaned up. And eventually the people that wanted things to be cleaned up won out.
Right.
But it took a long time, and it was a long, drawn out, all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court. I think that what alarmed the people more than the fact that there was prostitution and gambling and it was organized was the fact that the public officials were actually getting paid.
Yeah.
They were getting a slice of the action. And
that's what really alarmed.
And that's what
everyone.
alarmed people. That's, interestingly enough, that's what was most upsetting to them. And not that it existed, because everybody knew what was going on. You would come down here and you could see what was going on. But the fact that the public officials were profiting from illegal activities, no one could really stomach it. And that's ultimately what brought them down. Well, in 2006 is when they built this Crockett Street Entertainment District.
And it was really real lively at first. It's not quite as lively as it was. But you know, you can tell that it's a lot quieter here now.
And I think the economic downturn hit it hard, and it's hard to, but these are all, you know, these are restaurants and bars, and I think Beaumont, it's sort of right around the time that our book came out, really worked hard to create this entertainment district. And probably, you know, had we not had such a bad economic downturn, it might have kept up. We're hoping that it gets its swagger back one of these days.